Good morning, my name is Julian Rogers. Thank you for joining me this morning. I'm going to spend the next 20 minutes or so talking about CRM for the facilities management industry. But first, a little bit about myself. I've been in the CRM arena for around 15 years, both as a user, an implementer in pre-sales, and then more latterly is in a sales role. I've dealt cross-industry, so financial services, manufacturing, chemical industry, as well as a number of leading suppliers in the facilities management industry. Now here at Innovise, I'm representing the Microsoft practice and completely focused on the facilities management industry. So we're going to talk a little bit about CRM, but first of all, I'd just like to remind you about why we believe we're IT specialists for the FM sector. We've got a number of solutions out there, some of which I'm hoping that you'll be familiar with, things like PASS for staff vetting, TimeGate for time and attendance, and a number of other solutions, but perhaps things you won't be as familiar with us for are our hosting company, RapidHost. So we can make all of these applications available to you both in the cloud as well as on-premise. Finally, CRM for FM. Now that's what I'm here to talk to you about today. One other final thought before we continue is this quote I found as I was preparing this presentation from Mary Hayes Weir at Information Week. User adoption of enterprise software is critical to their competitive position. This is absolutely at the heart of our development effort. As important as features and functionality is producing a solution that your users actually want to work, and hopefully as we move through you're going to see this ideal within our CRM solution. So why is CRM, or what is CRM? I think the diagram very simple, but I think it sums it up. In a world where lots of companies offer in the prospect's eyes fairly similar solutions, where your differentiators may not be that obvious to the actual prospect, you've got to find some way to stand out. And CRM helps you, or customer relationship management helps you stand out from the crowd by providing an exemplary customer experience. So what it'll do is it'll ensure that every interaction that client, prospect or lead has with you is the corporate one, is the image that you're trying to get across as a business. And I think this quote from Drucker back in 1954, well before even the phrase CRM was thought out, sort of sums it up for me. And that's: the true business of every company is to make and keep customers. Particularly as we're moving out of this recession, I think that's more true than it perhaps ever was. So how's CRM traditionally positioned? We've got this concept of find, win and grow. So find would be your marketing users. You hear about the three areas of sales, marketing and service in CRM. Finding customers is very much the job of marketing as well as sales to some extent, but positioning your company in the best possible light so that prospects find you, but also going to market and seeking out customers. So that's one area CRM works with you. Winning customers, possibly the most obvious bit, but that's where the salespeople would interact with the CRM system to ensure that their processes are working well and consistently, and the ways of winning business well are being passed on as best practice to all the users of the within the company. Finally, we've got growing. Now growing is perhaps the most important. There's an old adage that it's far easier to retain a customer than it is to get a new one. So growing that customer base, being able to cross-sell other services. So if you're a total FM provider, being able to provide cleaning services to the customers that you do security for. Just that simple act of cross-selling, that sort of thing could potentially pay for a solution like this. But also in terms of service, things don't always go right. So providing them with a with a decent problem resolution mechanism, so that everybody can see it in terms of the service element, that's a key foundation of this too. We think it's a bit more than that though, because that basic contact management, basic sales process thing can be handled by lots of solutions out there. We believe the real key to it is putting in workflow. So workflow is a very commonly used term, but what does it actually do? What does it actually mean? Well, workflow, in my mind, is basically grouping together like tasks to produce a process. So if that's a process that's commonly executed and happens the same way every time, then it's there to be automated. Now let me use an example to get across what I mean. We've identified a tender, let's for argument's sake say it's an O2 tender. So we found it on the boards, and we now want to know what to do with it. Well, the thing about an O2 tender is you pretty much do the same thing every time with it. So we'll fire a workflow. First thing we do, obviously after looking at the documentation and deciding it's business we can win, is put that team together. So we can use the system to identify and put tasks in people's diaries to have that initial team meeting. We can then use the system to allocate the tasks. Unfortunately, the system's not going to write your response, but it can certainly help remind you to put in the correct bits in the response. So, have we added the environmental policy? Because the silly things like that are what people get excluded from tender processes for. Remember, the people reading these have a ton to go through, and you can be added to the waste pile simply by forgetting to sign the document, regardless of the quality of your solution. Then finally there's the approval process. So this takes it through management and the various people who are in a position to approve it, to ensure that the business you're going through and the approach that you're taking is the correct one. But it doesn't stop there, because then you have to submit the tender, you have to present your solution to the tender board or to the customer board. Then of course you hit that dreaded lose or hooray we've won moment. So let's hope it's a champagne moment, but again we don't stop there, because if it's a public sector tender, 3 years, 2 years, 5 years, whatever the deal's for, they go back to tender because they have to. So what you use is the system to leave that workflow ticking away in the background, so that just shy of the 3-year mark you can get all your ducks in a row and resubmit for the renewal. And should you actually lose the tender, 3 years, you can begin the rebid process. But bearing in mind all this was handled in the system, so you can see what you did last time, so potentially refine it to make sure that in 3 years time when you rebid you become successful. So what's the vision for CRM? Let's just step back to Drucker's quote for a minute and center this whole thing around the customer. Now, subject to the nature of your organization, many people can have a touch point with that customer, marketing, customer services, partners. The goal of CRM is to ensure that you create this single view, so that people having meaningful interactions with that customer are recording them for all to see. So, classic example is there's a problem going on at the moment, and the salesperson wanders in all happily trying to sell them something else or cross-sell them another service. All the customer wants to talk about is the problems that they've had, that they're having with a service not being done correctly. And of course this is a never-ending cycle, so while that customer is a customer, it's great to keep that history. The customer will remember what happened 18 months ago when something went wrong. All the users of the system might not, so it's nice to be reminded. Stripping it right back to basics, what's the mechanism that puts all that into place? So what are the core CRM areas? Now, in my mind, if we take this as a sales process, from a sales perspective, things start with the lead. I'm a salesperson, so I'm keen on leads. Now, whether you gather your leads from, they quite often start with bought-in data, very little information, or even just a business card. So if we think in terms of a business card, what do you see on that? There's the person, there's their address, and perhaps the notes you've scribbled on the back of what you're actually talking to them about. Now you then have a choice to make with that lead. Do you progress it further? Do you park it? Or do you discard it? Let's be positive and progress it further, and what we'll want to do is convert that lead, again using a little bit of workflow, to ensure there's no rekeying and it creates an account or a company with the contact on the business card as a contact or employee or person responsible at that company. Now let's take this one step further, and we were talking about a real need with this person at this event. We can also automatically create an opportunity for the new piece of business. Now, during this process there's been some things happening. There might have been emails happening backwards and forwards, there might have been phone calls. These are all activities, and of course we've got that nice workflow symbol, because where possible, if those activities can be repeatable or are repeatable, we can automate them. Now once we achieve a little success, we convert them into a customer. We then have the opportunity to deal with any problems that they may have, answer any questions, just generally keeping on top and making them happy customers. But by not shying away from problems and facing them head on, that's you standing out from the crowd and making a real difference. Marketing. It's important for marketing to have access to all of this data so they can see what's working and what isn't working, to create new go-to-markets, to identify more of those leads so they can segment all of this data to provide cross-selling opportunities, but also to identify potential new pools of leads or new target markets. We can integrate all of this to other systems. Now the classic might be integrating an opportunity to a back office system. Some of you use Timegate. That's an obvious point where we could look to integrate to. Finally, management information. Typically this is the catalyst that causes people to look for these systems. There's a board not really getting a good sight of their figures for their future business when it comes to business planning, because they can't see what opportunities are coming down the pipeline because the solution is not accurate. More often than not, we're invited in to talk to people because their management information isn't up to scratch. Now, underlying the whole of this solution needs to be the right kind of management information for your organization. CRM has to cover that. So, to that end, we've come up with CRM for FM. So wouldn't it be great if users could access that in a browser, which would mean they wouldn't necessarily be tied to their office desk. They could access it in an internet cafe, when they're on the road, from any browser, from anywhere. Now you might think those users with the laptops might be even better if we could put it into Outlook. So exactly, that's what we do. We put that solution into Outlook, so it's part of their day-to-day working. Salespeople log into Outlook first thing in the day, close it last thing at night. The first and last things that people tend to look at. Finally, because it's something that people want more and more, we can put this information onto PDA devices or smartphones.